Hi, Ann.
Hey, Roger. How are you? I'm just
Um,
to queue up our PowerPoint here.
oh, thanks. Yeah, and I was going to tell you, thank you for taking the lead on that. That was great. I'm just going to work off of that, and I sort of figured that, like, I'm happy that we have it planned, but I'm okay if it goes a little bit off the
Oh, absolutely. It can go
planned
way off.
rails.
I would be fine with that. It'd be kind of, you know,
Same.
I I don't get tense about that. I'm always more worried like, will we even have any people? These are the
Well,
things
yeah,
that concern me.
same. Okay. My biggest, the thing that I'm really, really hoping for is that the UPS person doesn't show up. I'm
Like during.
like, it's always my biggest, like, because he just,
It's always they never come.
right,
I mean, when you really need your package, they don't come.
right,
When
exactly.
you
And then,
when it doesn't really matter and you could get the package a week from now, they show up during like a Zoom meeting. When
that, yes, that actually happened. So, I mean, it didn't happen during a Zoom meeting, but yesterday, like, I had ordered, what did I order? Oh, this, I ordered a crazy old, like, like the wind up pencil sharpeners that you would put on the wall. I bought one of those. Um,
how retro.
Right, it was $10. And I was like, well, I'll put it on my desk. And but I totally was not. That was supposed to come in like 5 days from now, and it came in yesterday. I was in the mid. Oh, I was watching. I don't know if you're into timepieces and things like that, but Hulu has a historical fiction kind of little series about Catherine the Great, and it was in one of the, like, coup scenes where she's gonna take over and all that, and all of a sudden the UPS guy comes in. I was like, oh my god! And it was like, I'm not even expecting anything. Like,
Yeah.
gosh.
But whenever you really want your thing, then it does not come and it's late and and you're like sitting there waiting for it. You're like, where's my package?
You've got a lot better lighting than I do. See if I can fix
Well, I have learned the proper angle, in this room, right?
that.
Is but
I don't know. Oh no, that was worse. I don't
I
know
mean
that I
before you got here I was adjusting, right?
trying to figure out where
Now what will we do if we don't get any students?
Well, I don't know because Melissa said that, right? That it would be recorded. I don't know. That was going to be my question to you, actually.
Well, normally they record as soon as you turn them on. So I can see the record symbol going. But
Oh, it is going.
they're editable, so that's not a problem. But I mean, like we could just present as though there are students, and just record it or not. I mean, it might feel kind of silly,
I mean, maybe we can, if that's the case, well, I don't know. I'm fine with doing it. It would be weird. But we can also like say that we're, in terms of marketing, we can say that we're doing it again, but it's actually just a reschedule.
Well, yeah, that might be
someone...
smarter. Oh, hey, here comes a student, and it's a student I even know.
Oh, that's great. Here, let me put my phone.
Hey, Toby.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hello again, Ann. Didn't expect to see you here, but I suppose it makes sense.
Well, yep. This is Roger, our reference librarian.
Nice
and we got recruited to do this presentation together. Toby, we were just saying to each other, what if no students come, but so I'm glad to see you here. And it apparently, Roger, I have to admit students.
Oh yeah, there's probably a waiting room.
There's a waiting room. So I never set up with a waiting room, but Melissa set it up that way. So I'll keep an eye on the waiting room.
Sure, yeah. And yeah, I mean, Toby, if it's just us or just, a handful of people, and you know what?
Toby, what are you writing a paper about?
Well, I'm not doing a research paper right now, but I tend to treat a lot of my non-research papers as if they were research papers. So at the moment, I've been tasked with figuring out how to get exercise adherence into the minds of frequent non-exercisers.
Oh, that's excellent. Now, Roger, just as a side note, I disabled the waiting room and I see Melissa's here and another student. So we're looking good, I think.
I think so too,
Toby's current topic is exercise and encouraging exercise in non-exercisers. So I don't know if we can use that, but there you have it. Now, Caitlin, I see you there. Tell us what you're writing a paper about. Here she comes. Or Karina's coming. Tell us what you're writing a paper about, Karina.
I am currently not writing a paper. I'm a student success coach here with Melissa. So.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay, Karen, what are you writing a paper about?
Unfortunately, we can't hear you.
Yeah, you're still muted, Karen.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I'm not writing a paper on anything right now, but I just think this is incredible information to always have.
Oh, absolutely. We're just looking for sample topics. We might as well use yours if you have one. All right, so here comes Sarah. We'll see what she has to say.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, haven't seen you in a long time, Roger, now that the lockdown.
Yeah. I've been in the library Wednesdays and Thursdays.
I only popped my head in there once.
Right. Yeah. I think most students now. It's just kind of, with the irregular schedules and all.
Mm-hmm. It's still nice and quiet in there for studying.
This is true. Just the quiet area, sort of all the way in the back, is closed for now. But now we have some new furniture out. Well, you said you popped in your head there, but
I didn't look. I didn't look at that, but I do try to attend the Board of Trustees meetings. So I did know that they had been, they were going to be receiving that soon. So I have to go in and check it out.
Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable, I'd say. And the sort of 80s wooden, 70s wooden furniture.
So we got a few more people. We got
Yeah.
Dominic and Franklin and Caitlin. So that's great. So we'll follow the usual process, everyone, of staying on mute unless you want to say anything, just in case there's any background noise at your house. Now, after I say this, the background noise is always at my house, always, after I make that statement. But we'll try. And I think, Roger, we can start. It's 1. So thanks to Melissa for recruiting us to do a talk. And Roger is a reference librarian in MCC, and I'm in the English department. And what we have in mind, what I wish I had known about research papers, actually Roger's topic, but it's a great topic. Sometimes even after you go through a class like Comp 2, there's little tips that don't get covered because there's a lot to cover. And also, even if you think that you know what you're doing, sometimes there's a few little pointers you could be reminded of that would be helpful. So Roger's going to start with some tips from the library, and then presuming we have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about now, what do you do with that? How do you make use of it? So now, Roger, you want to share screen, right? And show from the database or something, or you tell me.
Why don't we stay with the presentations of the next couple of slides, and then we can share a screen, and I'll jump over to databases. I think this might be easier just to have it on the screen since you already have it there.
Okay, so research tips. What is college level? I always say we want to do college level papers and college level research, but what does that mean?
All right. So here from the first slide, and I guess I could be kind of thematically, we can kind of answer, we can sort of add on to what is college level as we go on. And thank you again, I just want to echo, and just thank you again for Melissa and her department for putting this together. I think it's a great, hopefully a series that we can keep on doing. This topic came to me kind of from my experience. I am a first generation Latinx person, and I am a community college grad, and a lot of the pain points that I had, I try to take as a student, and like not knowing how to do research or trying to figure it out on my own, sometimes being too shy to ask questions, and try to put it kind of into a presentation that might be helpful for you. So one of the things that I didn't know basically when I was in your position was I didn't know that databases collected everything, right? So, and just a little bit more of background about myself before I just continue. I used to work for EBSCO. So I used to work for a particular database, it's the religion database within EBSCO, but I worked for their platform, and basically I did the records that you as a student or researcher land on while you're doing research. So just so you know my whole perspective. Thank you for the care. So for databases in general, one of the things for you to know is that as a database employee, it's prudent for us to collect as much information as possible, because we want to aggregate all the information and kind of make it all there available for researcher students that are researching wide and far within a topic. So what that means is that we collect academic and scholarly articles, but we collect in a whole bunch of other, which is like newspapers and popular sources. So if you haven't gone through Comp 1, popular sources are basically newspaper, magazines, these types of things that you can find either in a grocery store or that you can find somewhere that you can purchase. Typically they're glossy, they have ads, the sort of reading level is not too high. Scholarly is something that you would find like you would write for your college paper, right? So when you're writing a research paper, you can have a combination of these And you can find all of these things in the database. One of the things that always surprises students when I tell them, there are, in fact, videos even in databases. So the Associated Press uploads videos to EBSCO in particular. I think they're the only ones so far that have that. But just to say that not everything that you find on there is going to be an academic quote unquote source. It can be really lots of different things. All right, so are there any questions so far, or is there anything that I've said that caught anyone's attention?
I just add that students all the time say to me, I know it's a good source. It was in EBSCO. And they're looking at like the Chicago Sun-Times. And they assume it's a scholarly source because it's in EBSCO, but this is not true at all. Everything's in EBSCO. So.
Right. Yes, and so just to piggyback off of that, there are, just because a source is good for Anne and her paper, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good source for me and my paper, even though it's the same source. Only because if I'm arguing the other point, right? Like if Anne's arguing the pro of something and I'm arguing the con, maybe that particular source might not be beneficial for my argument, right? And that's also something that authors take into consideration. And so it's understanding the bias of a source, and then understanding that you can get this in a database. So the first thing is EBSCO doesn't always equate a good source or the perfect source for my paper, because we collect them. I think the next thing here speaks more to the
slide.
Yeah, the next slide. Yeah, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. So the other thing so when we're talking about academic sources, right? So let's just go on to that sort of side of things here. We're talking about academic sources. What we're talking about typically is, if you're writing a research paper, you want to find something that has been written by an expert and has, and it's for experts, right? But it also has been vetted by experts, right? So there are ways to look for scholarly peer-reviewed articles within a database. I'll show you how to filter that once we get there. But it's thinking about like, okay, I'm looking at this, and then just having the 2 or 3 questions that are kind of roaming in your mind as you look at things, right? Who wrote it? Do they have any expertise, right? Are they presenting facts or opinions? And then similarly, you could also look at the publication, right? So what we're talking about just now. So if it was written by if it was written for a magazine or something like that, like for Time or something like that, that typically hasn't gone through the rigor of the popular source. So just saying that there's all the different types of things that you can find in there, and it's kind of on to you to kind of know how to sort of evaluate what it is you're looking at, right? And the vocabulary level here. So that's something that I want to talk about here. And that's something that we, in the face-to-face classes, talk about pretty at length. So when you're looking at a popular source, you're looking at a middle school grade level. And when you're looking at an academic one, you're looking at you can think about it professional, or you can think about it as a collegiate level. It's just, honestly, like in blatant terms, it's kind of harder to read, right? It's kind of censoring that type of thing. And the reason why we want that is because there's just more, the reason why that is because there's just more length and space for that author to explore that topic, right? They have about 20 pages rather than a newspaper article, which is about like, inches or a page, half a page if they get, lucky. Is there something you want to say, Ann?
Well, I was going to say, the more complicated the concept and the ideas, the longer the sentences get, the more upend the vocab. And if it's easy to read, being perfectly frank, it's probably not an academic source, which sounds contradictory. It's like, so now we need you to increase your game on your reading skills in order to digest the appropriate materials. But yeah, that's kind of how it is. So, question from Karen.
Yeah, Karen,
my question is, it should be difficult to read. I agree with that. I understand that there's levels, and I completely understand that. But as you're writing a research paper, I put a lot of time into my research. So I don't want to really research my research. If it's that difficult, honestly, I'm not going to use it. If I can't understand it, how can I put that and paraphrase that? I can only take that to a certain level, for me personally, at least.
Yeah, well, and Karen, it does take extra time. And there's extra risks too, because when you're paraphrasing from academic articles, if you don't thoroughly understand it, then you could misstate what the person is saying. And yet, here's the sad part, Karen. It is expected that we use sources at that level in college level work. So you're going to do at least some of it. And it's going to take longer to read. And yeah, you're going to be looking up some of the vocab, and yeah, that's going to happen.
And I have done that, and it's like, oh my God, I know I already spent too much time on my research before I start to write. But yes, it does add time. And yes, I do use those sources.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But when they come out and there's 372 pages, I'm like, are you kidding? I honestly look for another resource at that point.
Well, and you should, because that might be too in depth for your purposes, but it is, when I say it should be difficult to read, I don't mean like it should be because that's so cool. It's just a way for you to judge it. If it's difficult to read, that means it's at a top level, right? Like they're professors, right? For the most part, that write journal articles, and they're writing at a graduate school level, which for our students is 3 or 4 or 5 years above where they are right now. And that's how I say it in class. And that doesn't maybe seem fair, but that's the situation. So it does take extra time. Yes. But Roger has some tips too for saving time.
Yes, I do. Actually, Anne, can I share? I think this would be a good time. I can just jump in, so it won't be so theoretical. I can just share my screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just go ahead and do that?
Yeah, I stopped my share, so I think you should be able to share.
Okay. And can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we've got you.
Okay. All right. So y'all can follow along if you like. This is the main library page. Let's go ahead and click on here on the academic sources. We'll drop down menu right over here. And then we're going to go to A to Z, where all the databases live. And then I'm going to show you the second one here, which is the one with the little popular sign. It's mainly because it's the most applicable to all subjects, because they, as I was saying, so databases like some are special or have specialties, like there's a psychology one, there's only one for education. This one is for all subjects. So that's why we teach this one primarily in class. Okay, so here's what I mean. I'm going to put in my trusty example of environment, and then we can kind of use that as a launching point for what I was saying. But we could also look up exercise here in a second. This Toby's project. Okay, so up here, you'll put in your keywords. So hopefully you'll have some sort of research statement or main ideas that you're looking for, and you can plug those in. It will always come up with 3 search bars, so you can just put in the 3 if you have those, and you can always add more here. So if you have a super long or narrow topic here, or as you continue on your collegiate career, you can do, this is true for all Let's Go data. Okay, so I put an environment and I got a whole lot of results here. So here are some things that I just want to show you right off the bat. The academic journals look like this. There's a little icon right next to it, this little kind of thing right here. And this right off the bat lets you know pretty much 90% of the time that's an academic source that has gone through some vetting, right? You might want to click on it and I can show you what that looks like. But if you see that, that's a scholarly source, so you could, pretty sure you could do that. Speaking of the videos, here are the AP videos right here. So these are popular sources that are put in the database, right? So these you can cite, which is a great thing about these videos. If you use it, or if you're using something like for, if you're writing about a current topic or something like that, this might be a good thing for you to know. Let me see if there's a periodical. There is. Okay. So one way to, if you're looking for something in particular, you can go to source types over here on the left-hand side. And then as you see, we're on all results right now. But you can, so there's a magazine. So magazine, of course, is a popular source. You could do that. This would be good, for example, there's a colleague of ours that does, in her English classes, she does, talks about advertising. So if you're in something like that, you can go ahead and just put that. You click that and it'll be just a magazine. And that'll be good to know about what the advertising and things like that. Most times you have the PDF full text and you can actually see the magazine, which is pretty cool. But just in general, so there's even book reviews, which might not be helpful at this level, but as you go forward, you can, if you find an author or something that you might have cite and you're not sure about the book, you can just look at the book review and see if that's helpful. So this is here, all the different sources that you can look at. And one of the ones that I know Anne talks about and teaches is a government document. And I don't know, maybe you'll talk about that later. But just to give you an example here of the database does collect a lot of things. It's not quite the internet, right? Because there's no, for the most part, there's no blogs and things like that. For the most part, there are some that do like archive websites, but we don't have access to it. But that is capable. There is a capability. Okay, so these are the different sources on there. So I didn't know this to begin with. I didn't even know that there was even book reviews that were put on here. And there's so many book reviews, and students do cite those as the book, not knowing that it's a book review because they give an abstract. So are there any questions on that? In general, just the source types and different things that you can find on there?
So I would say that most of the time, most of your sources should be academic journals. But the point we want to make here is, don't make sure that that's what you're looking at if that's what you're supposed to be using.
Correct. I sometimes in classes, this might be helpful as I talk about keywords. So if we just step back, so we're just talking about like information and information landscapes, right? Just in general, and where you can just go and access the information that you need. From a very macro perspective, the internet and databases in general are just an index. So they're just telling you where the information is and how you get there, right? So how that pointer is just through the keywords that you put in. In this case, it would be environment. I'm going to click on the first article here to talk about keywords a little bit more, but also how we can save time, right? So one of the things that I didn't know how to do either was how to read this record. I didn't know what was on here and what was the information that I should know about. So the first thing we have here is a title, right? Pretty simple. We have authors. Most databases now, you can just click on these. So let's say that this person up here, oh, they only have one. But as you see, if they have more than articles, books, whatever it is that they publish, it'll come up on here if EBSCO has, that information. So these are all links. And then also the subject term here are kind of super important. So if you are in, say, the nursing field, you want to always make sure that you have the exact term of whatever it is that, if you're looking up a disease, if you're looking up a symptom, something like that. You want to have the more precise keyword. Similarly, same thing in any other field, you want to try to get as narrow as possible. So when you're thinking about your keywords or your idea in general, try to be as technical, if you want to think about it that way, or as official as possible. So if we're reading here, my advice is start with the title, check in with the keywords, right? So you should have some keywords or some idea of what it is that you're researching. See if this matches up. And maybe there is a more precise technical term that you want to click on, and you can. So these are also searchable. You can just click on school health services, and it will populate a whole other search that is searching for that subject. Yeah.
And a thing that's important here, right, is often when you put in your search terms, you're just guessing, right? And that's why you put in search terms that are really broad, like environment, and you get 1.5 million articles, which is way too many to look at. But the first one that you find that is even close to your topic, now will give you the subject term list, and now you have the more precise word and the words that the database archivers use, right? I say in class that now you know the words that are library speak, and you can click right on them, and now you're doing a search in library speak. And when we just did that, we were down to like 3,500 articles. Now that is still way too many to look at, but that's only one search term, and we cut it down that much. So these subject terms are very important. Your initial words are just a guess, and then what you're looking for is something close, an article that's close enough that you can get better subject terms.
But just going off of that, and something I was going to show you later, but since you brought it up. So let's say that you are guessing and you can't find something that you're looking for, right? So one place to do it, and I always try to do this in class, but honestly, there's just not enough time. So I'm going to click on subject terms right up here on the left, on the top bar up here. And it should bring up a screen like this. So here's the thesaurus, and basically what Anne is saying. So so my job was to read the article that I had in front of me, and then I was going to assign the main 5, 7, 10 ideas from that essay, right? So if I was reading about something about climate change and cars, I would put climate change, vehicles, and then I would keep on going down to any other applicable thing that I think a person might search for, right? So where I was using those words from is from this index right here, from this thing right here. Let me give you a real life example. So this is the one I always use. I was teaching a Lord of the Rings twofer, which it was philosophy and English. And we were trying to find pity, which is like a very thematic thing within Lord of the Rings. And if you put in pity here, and again, I'm trying to find the right keyword to put in up here in the search term. As you can see at the first search result here, it says pity, use sympathy. So I wasn't finding anything because I wasn't using sympathy, which is a word that it uses to search for that subject. So if you click on it, it'll bring up here, and there's actually sympathy in literature, which is the one that actually brought back a lot of the Lord of the Rings results because it was the most accurate topic, right? Or keyword, if you will. But if you're not sure, you could always click on it again, and it'll tell you what is entered here. So here is enter the words on emotion that is characterized by the ability to share feelings of others, especially to feel compassion and commiseration. So when I was looking for something to apply to a record, I would come in here and I'd be like, okay, well, this would be the one that I could use. But it also gives you the broader terms and narrower terms. So if you're looking for something more precise, let's put an exercise. Let's see what will come up. Since Toby is looking for something exercise. Right, so we have the main one here, and let's click on that. And then here are all the narrower terms that Toby might be interested in if they're looking for a specific type of exercise that would be appropriate for his project. And there's a lot of them, right? So in class, I always say if you're trying to play match with a database, so you're trying to think of the word that would closely match what it is that you're looking for that would be entered here. Because the database just can't have all these sort of search terms because this is only some space that you can have within a database.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I say in class is sometimes the student says, I couldn't find anything. And here's the bottom line. That's not possible. There's information in there. These databases are way too huge for there to be nothing about something that the student knows exists, right? Like if a general person, like one of our students, knows that something exists, then there's a lot on it in the database. Now, what it means is that the person is using the wrong search terms. That's why we're showing you this, because sometimes you find nothing or nearly nothing because you simply aren't putting in the right language. I think Toby had a question.
Well, I was going to add on to the experiment a little bit by saying that, yes, exercise is obviously too broad a term for what I'm looking for. We're kind of demonstrating the problem. We put in exercise and they start telling you about different types of exercise. What I'm looking for is a way to get people exercising and to keep them there, which my book refers to as exercise adherence.
Adherence, okay.
We could try adherence.
There it is. It has a category.
Yeah, so let's say that you did get here, right? Let me show you how to actually put it on up here. So you'll click on the little box here, and then you'll click on add, and then it'll show up here. If you want to keep on adding more things, let's say you, oh, right, so motivation actually might be one that you want to add. So you want to click on and here, and then you're just setting up kind of like a little algorithm up here, and then you can just hit search, and then it'll populate here for you, and then you have 18. And then since we're using this as this is good, so we landed on 18, right? So what if I were Toby, what I would do, I would look through here. First thing I would look at is the keywords, see what matches or doesn't match, right? So here we have women's health. So if you're looking at a particular, right, if you're doing a gender study, or if you're doing a particular population study, rather, that's something to consider. And then, so this one has a PDF full text and this one doesn't. So that's another thing. What the other thing to how you can limit or something to note is over here is the full text, and you could do that, and then all the search results will come back with just the PDF. And that went from 18 to 8. And then the other one that I was going to show you is the scholarly peer review here. And this just guarantees that it's gone through that peer review process. You might or might not want to add, click on that, Toby, depending on what it is that because you might get actually some from like this, right? So this is right here. This is actually looks like a magazine. So you can get something like this without clicking that scholarly peer review. So again, it's like knowing literally what buttons to click. Let's see if there's anything else here. Or did you have something else? Is there another search term that I can throw in here that might be good for you? Or just in general, does anyone else have like any other, like when you're in this position, is there, yeah, Karen.
Off topic, what does the DE stand for? I notice that every time you have something in that first box.
Yeah, great question. So the DE stands for, it's basically, it's the subject term. So it's the way that it gets coded. The other one that you might find on there as kind of like a prefix is SU, and that is also indicating that it's searching within the subject rather than trying to match word for word. Does that make sense? So the reason why the subject term or this up here is great is because it will always populate within the subject. It'll search kind of wider, if you will, or more. Sometimes it's more precise, honestly. But again, it might be too precise. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let's do this here. Right, so now we went to 600. So there will be. So let's see if I can put it back the way I have it. I think it's all. Oh, see, that one didn't come out. Okay, that's a little weird. I might have to go back and click it from the subject term, but this one has 62. There you go. So there are some differences. So what I do, if you've taken a Comp 2 class and it's been online and you've received any email from me, typically what I do is I'll receive like, Toby will send me his research statement. I'll take a look at it. And the first thing that I do is when I'm offering keywords or suggestions for keywords is I just come into the subject terms and I just look through the source, because honestly, it's the easiest way. Like, climate change is another one that has like a whole bunch of different things that you can look at. So there's climate change and politics. This is a very popular kind of topic for Comp 1 and Comp 2. That's the subject terms. I just want to show you, are there any questions on that before I go back to the record and kind of just show you the very last things here before I hand it over to Anne? Is there any other questions about subject terms? Karen, if we click here from the record, and because you're on subject terms, I believe this will auto-populate. Oh, I have to go back. Sorry about that. Just go back to the environment. All right, so let's say that you're in this article or in this record. You can click on this here, and I believe it'll come up with, it'll come up with the subject term. And then one last thing. So if you don't do it that way, so that's the more technical term. ESCO now has suggestions on here that has these kind of lines like this, and this is totally great to use. Just so you kind of conceptually understand what is happening here. A lot of these terms are quote unquote variants. So they're the alternates for the official keyword. So that's, you just think of it that way. So basically what we're saying is that all these words kind of are equal or very, very close in value or what they represent. Yeah, Karen.
So it automatically adds the Boolean connectors then?
Yes. And if you're familiar with the Boolean, right? So the or means that you can use all of these interchangeably. So what we're saying here is that it's fine for the database to search teens or adolescents or youth or teenagers, because for our purposes and for what I'm doing my research on, it's okay that it's that wide of a net because it's basically the same population. Does that make sense? And sometimes that's useful for this, or let's say that we're doing this and then we're looking for college students, right? We can do something like this as well. And it's college students or university students, so it's casting the widest net. And then this is good for when you're starting off, when you're trying to piece together your research statement, or you're trying to gather some research before you start your paper. This is a good thing to kind of plug in there. Let's see if there's one last thing. Okay, and one other way to search, to kind of filter your search results is by dates. So let's say that you're doing, if this search on college students and teens is, you want to know, millennial population like that, you can sort of push it down to whatever is applicable for you. So here is 1938, and you can move it all the way basically to present day. So if you need something within the last 5 years, you could do that. You can toggle this way, or you can put in the actual, you can type it in. So
you could actually kind of you can find out since COVID, if there's been an uptick.
Yeah, so it's by year, so it's not as precise as months, but it is right. So you can do from 2019 to 2020, and then yes, theoretically that would be the time period in which that would be the case. Yeah.
The use of these suggested searches that give you all the synonyms it's just a key trick, because again, you might not think of all the synonyms, or you might not know, but they're there. And Karen, if I were looking for something since COVID, another line that I would make here would be COVID or coronavirus or pandemic, so those lines can also be used for, here's my general topic, and then here's the specific subtopic, right? That I'm looking for. And then you could, what I always advise is do several searches on each of your subtopics. So each of your like support paragraphs, I would do a separate search.
Absolutely. Yeah, Toby.
This whole time there's been a set of buttons up there that I believe we haven't interacted with, which is the select field. What part of the categorization does that interact with?
Good question.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, that kind of ties in back into what Karen was saying. So here are all the prefixes actually. So so the way that we were looking for, where's that DE? It should be in here. But it's basically if you are looking for specific, right? So if you're looking for a title, an author, the text, this sometimes works, but it's basically searching within the PDF. So it's as good as that searching is available through there. One thing that I will actually show you, so the author supplied keywords. So there sometimes it depends on the journal and the publication. Sometimes the publication will ask the author to supply whatever it is that they think the main keywords are, and that's on there. Let me see. I think that the record that I was showing you had that. Let me see if I did a quick COVID search. I think this one had it. Oh, here it is. So right down here is another way. So this means that this came from the author. Like the database employee like myself did not supply these. So these are not. Sometimes they use the sort of Library of Congress keyword suggestion, but sometimes they don't. So that's what that means. And sometimes they're more conversational. And so it's title, author, subject terms. You can even search within the abstract as well. So this gets really linear within the database. If there's no other questions, I'm gonna hand it over to Anne. I feel like I've hogged the time here a little too much.
I would say also that select a field like limiting to the title or the abstract can be useful when you have way too many results. So, you know, you put in all the search that you can think of, like you're using all these lines as best you can, and you're still getting, 3,500. Well, then you can take one of those lines and limit it to title, and it will usually cut it way down, and narrow it more to the articles that you really want to look at, where that's so key a concept that it's in the title.
Yeah, and I would say most times if you're using that is because it's typically because you have some information, right? Like either you found a really good author that it deals with whatever your project is and has published, 10, 15 years worth of stuff, then you can do that, right? Then you can do that specific author, or you can click on an article and then click on the author like we can here. And then lastly, this is the abstract here, down here. So read the title, read the keywords, compare that, read the abstract, and then if it all checks out, then go ahead and click on the PDF. And that was the last sort of bookend to my sort of thing that I wish I knew. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing here, Anne.
This is great stuff to wish that you knew. I mean, a lot of it I didn't know either, even like until grad school, some of it. So let's see. So a concept we briefly just touched on, source variety. Normally, instructors will be telling you they want journal articles. They want what they'll call academic or scholarly sources. That means that peer-reviewed journal that's labeled in EBSCO academic article, and other databases have other ways of noting that, and you can tell when you click on it that it is an academic source, for one thing, because again, that vocabulary level and sentence complexity is pretty high. There's, generally no ads. There's nothing slick about it. It looks like a report, right? But also, just to keep in mind, and I do emphasize in my comp too, that there are government reports which are very similar in terms of quality, and the government publishes a lot of stuff. So I actually assign and have students go find at least one government report. Now, that's not a web page from the government that's written by the government for just giving general information to the public. But normally, if you're on a government web page, then the deeper research is linked. It'll say, in our report of the 2020 census of blah, 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 you'll be like, yeah, let's look at that. So when they mention, here's our report, or it's linked down at the bottom, that's a good quality government source, and it's outside of the databases. It may also be in the database, but it might not be. And those can be good for getting source variety. So variety is something instructors value. An error that students sometimes make is they end up citing 2 or 3 articles, for example, from the same author. And it would be better to have variety. So one very good way to get variety is a government report. And also another good way to get variety is a primary source. And there are some of those in the database. So again, worth looking for. A primary source is something that is not prepared for publication. So it is original documents. For example, if you're writing a paper on a scandal, right? Some sort of corporate scandal. The primary documents would be the internal emails. They never intended to be published. They're the kind of thing that would appear in the court record or people would use for evidence. But sometimes primary source like that kind of material gets into the internet or the databases, and it's worth looking for. And it's an excellent way to add source variety. And I wish I had known when I first started college that a way to impress teachers is to have a source that is not so easily found and not so obvious, and not just the same sources that any student's going to find looking. And one way to do that is to dig deep on those government sites till you get to the reports. You'll know you're at a report because it'll look like an academic source. In other words, it'll have charts, it'll have very complicated language, it'll have other citations to other reports or articles. And then that's a cue to you, oh, this is of that same level of quality, academic. And here's another thing, and I've actually seen someone do a whole presentation on this, which we could do someday, Melissa, but once you have a journal article, and Karen, you were mentioning before, you pull up an article that's 100 pages or whatever, totally intimidating. Most of them are quite long. And Roger was just saying, you read the title, you read the abstract, you see if it checks out as something you might want to read. But even after you click on it and you open it, the important thing is to just read the introduction, then only skim the whole middle section that's usually called methods. It's just going to tell you what they did for their research. But down at the end, there's a section called either results or summary or conclusions. And that is where the juicy stuff is. That's what they've decided or what they're arguing that they've shown or established. That's the good stuff. And what happens mostly is that students start to write their citations from the introduction, and they end up doing a lot of secondary citation. So the introduction mentions, here's so-and-so's research on this. And then the student goes ahead and wants to talk about that, but that's called an indirect citation because that's the writer talking about someone else's work. And you're not even supposed to do that. So rather than trying to get any citation from the introduction, you want to get down to the end. And you want to make sure that you're looking at sentences which are written by those authors, not where they're talking about what someone else has written. And just by the way, if you really need that article where they talk about what someone else has written, let's say that I, Ann Humphrey, write about what Roger Morales has said. And you're like, oh, Humphrey, forget her. I don't need her stuff. I need Moreles's article, right? Now you got to go back in and search for Roger's article and get back to the original. And that using of, we call that a secondary sourcing, secondary citation, indirect citation, is a real no-no. And again, I really wish I had known how much teachers don't want that and don't approve of it. But the secret to not doing it is when you get the article, go to the end. That's where you want to pull your info from.
And I think Toby had a question.
Oh, good. Yes, Toby.
Unfortunately, I don't really know how to phrase this question, so give me a second to put it together. For example, right now, I'm looking at, not literally looking at it right now, but for my paper, I'm looking at a briefing from the CDC, which is relatively short, relatively easy to understand. It has all the official information in it, but most of its official information comes from other studies done by the CDC. You're saying that even though it's all the same information, even from the same general source, you need to go into each of the individual studies and grab the information from there.
If you're writing a college research paper, yes. Now, for your own personal research, the briefing might be fine. A briefing is one step up from, say, a press release. In other words, it's simplified and pre-digested for public consumption. And so just in general, Toby, that's not college work, right? For reasons I'm about to get to in professors' expectations, you want to dig further back into the original research. You want to be hearing from the original researchers. And then you want to be making your own decisions about it and your own conclusions, or relating it to whatever it is that you are also talking about in your other paragraphs, right? So again, this is why I started with this concept of what is college level. If you just are researching for yourself and you're trying to just find something out, then your CDC briefing's fine. It's probably fairly factual, right? It's full of information from the government. For the most part, we can trust them. Again, but for the most part, right? So, yeah. But now, if we're talking about doing college level research, it's really not. That was a great question, though. Remember, even when you get to those other reports, Toby, skim to the end where it says conclusion or summary or findings, something like that, right? That's a real time saver, right?
Yeah, that honestly is one of the best things. Like, it's one of the hardest things, and also once you get it, it's kind of life-saving. Especially, like, I had to learn it the hard way, especially in grad school, and I had to perfect it once I started working at EBSCO, because I couldn't sit there and read word for word everything that I was going to put on there. So you just learn how to skim chapter headings, first couple of sentences of whatever might seem important. If you see, as you're skimming, if you see that there's a repeated topic or theme, right? Like if the author is spending 3 pages on some sort of exercise, then that might be something that you want to consider. But skimming and then going to the conclusion. Read the intro, skim the headings, and then go down all the way to the conclusion. Because like Anne said, typically in the intro, they'll quote something to contextualize their argument, right? Or if they're responding to someone, right? Like if I'm responding to whatever Anne wrote, then I would put that in my intro, right? Anne Humphrey said that online teaching is best, and I don't like that, so I'm going to put that in the intro to contextualize and say it's the worst, and then I'm going to put all the reasons why it's the worst, right? But if you're just skimming that and you're not really, then you would quote that incorrectly. And so read the abstract and then go down to the conclusion.
All the time, students are misattributing statements because they aren't noticing that Morales is actually talking about Humphrey to disagree with her, and or vice versa, right? So that's why we don't want those indirect citations. We want straight from the writer. Yeah, so now we have had a great time here and had some spectacular questions. I'm kind of excited about a few points on my last few slides, so I'm just gonna at least do them. So why is all this important? What are we really looking for? I think most of you have heard around the college, right, that critical thinking is our primary general education goal. And in fact, what you're looking for is enough information that you are not just regurgitating what others have said, but you are coming up with your own ideas. And the reason why we emphasize critical thinking around the college is that that is how we generate our own ideas. We don't just take what we have. That's the first level of critical thinking, knowledge. Every level above that is us adding to it, thinking harder about it, comparing, taking apart, putting back together in a different way. And the reason for research is often students make the mistake that they're doing research in order to just find out what other people say and then re-say it, you know, just to prove they've been to the library. And on the contrary, your instructors at the college level want you to show critical thinking, want you even to show each step of critical thinking. And if critical thinking does not ring a bell, then I would write on www.mchenry.edu, just look at the ePortfolio pages, which talk more about critical thinking. But it's not regurgitation. And again, I wish I had known that. Students think in terms of prove. I'm going to prove my point. No, you're not. There's thousands of people more experienced than you writing about this right now. You're not going to prove. You're arguing. And in order to argue, you have to show your own thinking. So that teachers really are expecting, I mean, what is college level work is that you show critical thinking. You also want to show a higher level concept mastery. So again, not just regurgitating, but I'm giving 2 tips here. Can you explain it in your own words, not someone else's? And can you give a comprehensive explanation, not just one point, but a whole picture? And that's, again, all upper level thinking, more thorough, and college level. And then independent ideas. So mixed into the paper are your ideas. And when I say this, students are sometimes confused and they think they're supposed to contradict. Like they're supposed to find research that says one thing and then just disagree. I disagree, you know, and that's not what I mean by independent ideas. I mean, it's not contradiction, and it's not that you're just inventing your own stuff, but that you show your personality and your own experience and your own commitment through your choice of examples or the way that you choose to use information or what you compare to, okay? So your explanation, okay, is inventive. That's you bringing something to the table. I wrote here, show personality and voice and wording, detail choice, phrasing. So if I assign the exact same topic and even give the same exact sources to 20 students, I should get entirely different papers from all of them. Even if I assign a thesis, I should get entirely different papers because they will be writing with very different personality and from a very different experience base, okay? And a lot of times, I wish I had known how much of my personality and thinking needs to show on the page. You need to just do it, but you need to show it, right? So these are the keys, right? What do you compare to? How do you explain? How are your sentences put together? What is your word choice? What do you choose to emphasize, or what details do you choose? And by the way, when we talk in Comp 2 about paraphrasing instead of using direct quotes, this is one of the reasons. When you paraphrase, in order to successfully paraphrase, you have to really understand the original sentences. And that's what we're trying to show, right? When we paraphrase, we're trying to show our grasp and complete grasp of it. Again, I wish I had known how much of myself was supposed to get into the work without contradicting.
That's I can speak to that. It's the same thing. And one thing that changed for me, and maybe this will change for others, and kind of piggybacking off of what Dr. Humphrey said, is that like it's the invitation to join the conversation rather than to prove or argue for that. You're trying to engage and put yourself in the conversation by saying, hey, I've read these, like I read so and so, and these are the points and things that they're providing. And then there's this over here, and this might be part of the conversation too. And I think that bringing these 2 points together, or these 2 conversations, or whatever it may be, I think that this, and that's the way to argue rather than like, no, I don't agree with so-and-so, I don't agree with so-and-so. It's more of like you're showing that you can grasp the conversation around the topic that you're researching, and then you're trying to engage with it in your own way. So that's where I think what we're talking about here, where you inject yourself, is more in that, right? So you're presenting it through your lens because you're the one that read it, right? So I would imagine from a instructor perspective, I want to know that you read it and also what it is that you have to say about it in terms of you engaging with it, right? I'm assuming here.
Yeah, I want to read and at some point go, ooh, clever. and that I might say that regarding an idea, a comparison, a detail, a specific way a sentence is structured or worded. And if I think that once or twice and there's no other errors, then that's probably an A paper, especially at this level, freshman, sophomore level. Do you want your instructor, if you get into a junior, senior level or graduate school level, saying, ooh, clever, almost every page? Well, yeah, but at this point, at least a couple times. And that's hard. If you're just thinking in terms of repeating or proving that you've been to the library, you're not going to get to the best quality that you can do. And you can all do it. It just takes more time and thought. And finding really the right sources, and being willing to dig pretty deep. Students will just put in their main keyword and click on the first 3.
Yeah, and oftentimes in what I say in class, and the way that I just have now taken to ending it is kind of like, just take the extra 4 or 5 clicks. It's not, you don't have to physically walk somewhere. You could just do the 4 or 5 extra clicks, right? So if you're looking at an author you don't know, click on where you can get the information. If you find the email on the database, then copy and paste it. If it has an edu at them, then you'll probably find the CV or you'll find the resume pretty quickly. So it's literally just 4 or 5 on average. It's about 4 or 5 clicks. So it's really not like a crazy thing to have.
No. No, and I have a demo that I do in Comp 2 that I just call mining. And you pull up any low quality source, even a blog or a newspaper article, and you just look at what is linked there. And you're like, let's look at that. And you just keep digging until you get to something that's worth using, because often they're linking to the researchers. They're linking to the government reports. They're linking to the papers published at whatever university that have gotten out of the databases and are on someone's faculty page, right? And if you just keep going, you get to that better stuff. But if you only look at the first thing that comes up, you don't get that far. So yeah, just 4 or 5 more clicks. That's a great line, Roger. I'm gonna copy that. Yeah. But you do have to be willing to do that clicking. And yes, it does show. And yes, your instructors know when you've dug deeper. And yes, they know when you're thinking harder. And yes, they notice when you try harder to use clever phrasing and, more precise vocabulary. Yes.
Yeah, and I can definitely tell you from my perspective, when I get a search history or when I get a research or something that a student has done, yes, similarly, we can also tell whether you've done some work or not. And it's typically by the keywords that you use, right? Because if you just use exercise, like we just talked about, and not go down to exercise adherence and not go down to whatever else might be down there, it's pretty obvious that you just didn't do that 1 or 2 clicks. It's really not that. Yeah, it's more effort for sure, but also just knowing that it's there. So
I've been saying lately to add lines in the search, Roger, until you get under 100 results. Because I figure 100 they can actually look at, and
yeah,
it's
I
narrowed
know.
down, right? So how do I know that they're there? They got under 100, you know? And before COVID, I would just walk around behind and look and go, oh, 250. Better add another concept, right? But again, it's worth it, right? Because all the work you put in at the beginning narrows it to a point where at the end, you know, now you have an amount that you actually can look at, and most of what you look at will be on point. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Roger, we're right at 2, so we have to say goodbye. And we had some students.
Bye, everyone. And
if you have questions, remember you can find Roger in the library. Yes,
my office is in the back right with the big Homer reaching for a donut. And I think Ann's is upstairs in the English department. Same building in A. So feel free to email us or me if you have any. And just so you all know, you can set up Zoom appointments too. So if you can't come into the library and you're struggling, we can do this one-on-one from our respective places. So thank you for coming. And again,
thank you,
feel free to reach out.
And Roger,
Yes.
Roger, I'd like to take you up on that because I do have I'm doing an internship,
Okay.
and I was trying to look on Westlaw for some cases and I can't find anything, but now
Okay.
that medical marijuana is available, we have a woman who is 7 weeks pregnant and smoking pot,
Okay.
and I'm trying to find, I couldn't find any case law that would say that she's an unfit mother, so that as soon as that baby's born, we can take it away. So all I did was a Google search, so I got the basics, but now I'm wondering, now if I can find something much more, you know, concentrated for this attorney to go and present to the judge.
Okay. Yeah, there's different states have different laws on that. It would have to be more granular, but here, let me just send me an email or give me yours and I'll write it down and I'll just, or put it in the chat actually, if you don't mind.
And maybe there's some scientific evidence too that would be of interest to the judge on prenatal damage, or, you know, prenatal, I don't know, addiction.
Well, and
damage,
I found a lot of,
yeah,
I did find a lot of stuff on that. It's very interesting because that THC stays in a portion of the fetus for 30 days. So if the expectant mother is smoking once a month, that baby has continuously been on marijuana their entire, you know, time.
So wait, is the case is for it? Is it so that they can, or are they looking to, or have they? Can you repeat it one more time?
Well, we don't want this mother to have. She's an awful mother, and she has an older child who's 2, and you know, it's a history of drug abuse, and which is much more common than I ever thought until I started to do this internship. I'm like shocked. But anyway,
but just so you know, so go ahead.
I couldn't find anything on Westlaw, so there's no, you know, maybe there's something there. I mean, I'm not that good with Westlaw yet, but you know, in order to make case law, you have to make sure that no one else has had a charge like this before. The problem that I don't know, I can only get so specific is because I don't know if it's recreational marijuana or a medical marijuana. And what I did learn is that a lot of pregnant, like I think it's gone from like 1.7 to like 3.8% of pregnant women are using marijuana to ward off morning sickness. And so now is that going to be something that the health field thinks it's acceptable? So, you know, it becomes a very complex thing.
Yeah. So just so you know, we don't have law
Right.
databases.
I know that.
So I can search and see what we have in terms of, sometimes they, like I said, sometimes they do have government documents, but it depends on which one I'm looking at. So I'll get in contact with you, and I'll send you a link so you can do a Zoom meeting. But I'll get jumping on it today.
Okay, and the reason that sparked me is because of this presentation when you showed that there, all the way down on the bottom, there was one government article that linked to the subjects you were, so that kind of really sparked an interest. And I'm thinking, shit, I hope I have access, sorry, to
Okay.
the MCC's library database when I graduate in December, because this is something that I could really use a lot.
So good news on that is community members do have access.
I'm a
But,
taxpayer.
well, yeah, isn't it, Roger, that you have to go in and like get a username when you graduate? Then
I think,
you're
yeah, I think once you graduate, we just switch your status over to community member. You know, it's more. I think there is some differences, but really minor. I can't really remember, but you do have access to the database.
That's great news for me, you know, because as much as I love being in school, I hate to leave it because I have so many resources here, just like this workshop today. What I also learned is, after taking Comp 1 and Comp 2, is, Roger, I did see your presentation in Comp 1 and I saw your one in Comp 2, but I actually learned much more specific stuff. So I wonder if you can break those things down to, like, maybe only having a 20-minute presentation 2 times during Comp 1, and maybe, you know, piggyback that on Comp 2, instead of trying to get your whole class's attention for the entire period.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about internally, and I think I've always been on board with that, because I know I've did that when I worked at Chicago Community College. That's how we did the majority of our info lists, and we were kind of embedded. But I don't think it's not so much the library; it's more of like the way that we have it set up currently, because we do the hour and 20. But I agree with you. It would, and I think honestly, the way that it worked better at, or the reason why I think it worked better that way in city colleges, is because you can pick your spots, right? So to Humphrey I would come in the first month or so, and then I would do something more high level, sort of conceptual. Then we do more hands-on the third time. I totally agree with you, and I'll pass it all to my director. But yeah, I mean, I've proposed it before, and I think actually with Anne, I came back to your class a couple of times that one semester, or maybe not the COVID semester, but the previous one.
in an experiment. There have been some experiments, Karen, too, and the librarians worked enormously hard this summer to redo so much of their LibGuides and web pages. That was just awesome. So yeah, you know, too late for you, but there will be changes.
Well, I'm on student government, and it's interesting because I actually am the faculty council representative for the student body. And I brought up a very simple matter last Thursday of the students are having a hard time organizing all their Zoom links. And, you know, like my son is a full-time student at MCC, so he does everything on his phone, and he has some other kind of software. I have no clue whatsoever what he's doing, and I'm sure I cannot figure it out. I write it on the back of my planner. And it was Megan Scanlon is doing the Step Up program, and her Canvas page is like perfect. And it's like, I don't have to search for anything. Everything is like right there. And when I brought it up to the academic council, they were like so grateful to have student information and requests and concerns. So I just wish there was more department heads that would kind of go with a group of students, because you guys don't really, you know, you teach, you're the academic side, we're the learning side, and things like that. I think if you break these seminars into smaller pieces, I would have gotten more out of it. Like, this stuff is great. I don't have any more comp classes, but this is great for me, you know, what I learned today. So just food for thought.
Well, yeah.
Thanks. No, yeah, thanks. And yeah, I mean, you know, Melissa, I mean, we had talked about doing more of these. So, yeah, I mean, we could totally do a reoccurring
Well,
series
you know,
thing every semester, but
the problem with that, Roger, is you can put it out there and then people just don't do it. Like, I'm so glad.
Melissa's
And these,
gonna archive these though, and she's
Pardon?
gonna get them. Melissa's gonna archive these videos, and she's gonna get them somewhere,
Mhm.
right, Melissa?
Well,
And I can walk you through that if you need. I left a message earlier because, yeah, because I think we really should do that. And I haven't even seen any of the other ones. I just kind of know what you're trying to do. Because a lot of times students can't come right then, but if you had a library
exactly.
of these, just,
Yes.
and it's not going to be hard to do.
Yeah, and we're hoping that because right now we have the student resource page,
Yes.
and I know that we have like a little spiel on us, and I'm hoping that I can put the recordings on there so students who weren't able to attend today, because I did receive a few emails saying I would love to go but I have class or whatever the case may be, they can see this recording and, you know, maybe get some of their answers, you know, questions answered through this video.
And that's true, because last semester, and I think the semester before, a workshop like this was offered, and both times I had classes. And it was something I wish I was able to take. I'd also like to see the one on Marshall Fields too, but I don't think that that's an academic thing.
Yeah.
And also, if
Almost
Melissa,
anything can be recorded.
if you put this recording in, Melissa, you have to get rid of this whole end of this
Oh yes,
conversation.
I will. Don't you
Thank
worry. I will. Don't you worry.
Okay, because I don't want people to know about what I said about the case.
No problem. I gotcha.
Okay,
No worries.
thank you. Well, thank you so much. I
Thank
learned a
you for
great deal
coming.
today. So yeah, so this was a great resource
Great.
tool for me.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Okay, bye guys.
Thanks
See ya.
again, Melissa, for putting it together. Thank you,
Thank
Toby.
you, Melissa.
bye, Toby. Bye, Karen. Bye, Melissa. Thanks.
Thank you. To